Hello and welcome to Stars, Cells, and God. My name is Hugh Ross. I'm an astrophysicist and the founder of Reasons to Believe USA. And today I'm joined by a very special guest who is the founder of Reasons to Believe Africa and also an astrophysicist, David Block. And David, I
Yes,
met you back in 1983, and I'm
gosh.
just thrilled about our 43-year-long friendship. So,
Oh,
yeah, we're here to talk about eclipses and solar eclipses. There is a difference between a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to talk about your background, your research, and then jump into the topic of what we can learn from solar eclipses, what's so exciting about solar eclipses, and what we can look forward to. So
yes.
take it away.
Thank you, Hugh. Well, of course, it is such a treasure to have a friendship with yourself and with beloved Kathy going back, as you say, to the 1980s. Uh, I am the director of Reasons to Believe Africa, which is an exceedingly interesting offshoot of Reasons to Believe US, which you founded, because there is such a need for apologetics on the continent of Africa. And as it turns out, this eclipse of the century, which we'll jump into in due course, is happening on the continent of Africa too. I was trained, Hugh, as you know, in applied mathematics, general relativity, cosmology, and galaxies. So essentially, my background is applied mathematics and astronomy, and then thrown in some relativistic astrophysics. I grew up in the days when names such as Kip Thorne were center stage, Stephen Hawking, of course, and many of the people you personally knew, even John Wheeler was alive, of course, the black hole guru. So that is my interest. But with regard to my uh, coming to know the Lord in an intimate way, I was raised in an Orthodox Jewish family, Hugh. Um, I went to shul regularly on Friday nights, on Shabbos, and so forth. And I came to faith in Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, King of the Jews, in October of 1976. So this recording with the two of us is exceedingly meaningful because this year is the 50th anniversary year of myself and of my wife, Liz, coming to faith in Jesus in October in the year 1976. So it really is a milestone of grace, as it were. But I suppose on my heart, over many, many years, Hugh, has been the desire, as it has been with you, to share the fact that the heavens are not silent. No, the heavens are not silent. The heavens declare the glory of God. And I cannot fail but look at a galaxy, look at the planet Saturn with its rings, look at solar eclipses, whatever the case is. Whenever I'm at a telescope looking at images, I just say, wow. And that's really the reason, the raison d'etre for Reasons to Believe Africa is to give people that wow experience. They're not living in a silent cosmos.
And that wow experience is something that I even see our atheist colleagues commenting on. I mean, it always amazes me that they refer to these grand design galaxies and the beauty of the quasars and even the fast radio bursts. It's like they can't help themselves but be awed by what they're observing. And it's fun hearing you mention Kip Thorne and John Wheeler.
Yes.
I had the privilege of taking courses from both of those gentlemen.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And hearing Stephen Hawking give lectures at Caltech. So, yeah, when you live this long as an astrophysicist, you get to have some incredible encounters with amazing people, but also with the heavens that are declaring the glory of God.
That is so
And
true. And I mean, you were at Caltech, so you knew all these legends like Kip Thorne and so forth. They were really giants, you know. Stephen Hawking wrote that beautiful book, The Large Scale Structure of Space Time. Extraordinary works. And what also really touched my heart, Hugh, many years ago, were the remarks of Stephen Hawking himself that if the universe expanded too quickly, galaxies wouldn't form. If the universe expanded too slowly, there'd be no, it could have recollapsed into a black hole. So the fine tunings were impregnated in the mind of Stephen very, very early on. In fact, in the 1970s, uh, and I think that's a central point in my mind is how he was fascinated by the fine tunings. He never acknowledged that it was the work of the creator. But in those early years, in the 1970s, he wrote quite a lot about the incredible findings. Do you remember that, Hugh?
I do. And a friend of mine at Caltech, Don Page, who is a very committed Christian, went to Cambridge to do his postdoc, couldn't find any place to live. And so Stephen and his wife Jane said, "Well, you can live with us." And I
Gosh,
remember Don Page saying, "Well, that's a very generous offer, but I'm a Christian. I begin my days with Bible study and prayer. Is that going to be a problem?" And they
yes.
said, "It will only be a problem if you don't allow us to join you." And
Wow,
so for a
wow,
4 year period, Stephen and Jane had morning quote devotions with Don Page. I
wow.
remember Don telling me too that the thing about Stephen, he was fine with the discussion as long as it stayed at the level of deism. Once
Mm,
you got to the personality of the creator, you got the famous Hawking smirk, which basically was saying to everybody, "I've stopped listening to you."
mm,
So, and I
mm.
think you see deism in his best selling book, A Brief History of Time, where
Yes,
it basically says there has to be something, but he
yes.
didn't call it someone, it was simply something.
Right, right. What's very interesting, Hugh, is that he claimed that philosophy was dead, and yet the whole raison d'etre for his multiverses, which are which is like an escape route, if you like, to try and get rid of the fine tunings, is that was his philosophical viewpoint. So he was saying, look, ladies and gentlemen, philosophy is dead, and yet he was saying he wasn't saying, but he was inventing the multiverse hypothesis, which is a hypothesis
Yeah, that's a
to
great irony. These physicists who say philosophy is dead, and then they wax eloquently on philosophy. So, hey, let's talk about eclipses.
yes,
And the thing I've noticed is when people see a total solar eclipse, it's just so awe-inspiring to them. When you mentioned the heavens declare the glory of God, there's nothing like a total solar eclipse to really strike people with that awe.
yes.
So, and
Oh, absolutely, Hugh. I have led many teams, as you know, probably about 10, to see the Aurora Borealis in Norway. And I've led also, I remember there was a total eclipse of the sun near Beit Bridge in South Africa. And we'll go into the physics of eclipses in due course. But to tie into your point, you are so right. When the moon totally eclipsed the sun at Beit Bridge, uh, I just saw one lady in particular just standing and weeping.
yes,
So I didn't say anything, nothing. And then after the eclipse, I just went up to her and I didn't say anything. I just stood next to her. And she just looked me in the eye and she said to me, David, that was just so beautiful.
yeah.
And she wept. And that's the feeling I have whenever I see these eclipses. What are your thoughts, Hugh?
Well, when I was a teenager, I took people off in the Pacific Northwest to see total solar eclipses that were scheduled to happen. And, you know, it rains there a lot, and every single total solar eclipse was either rained out or overcast with very heavy clouds. We
Yes.
felt the temperature drop, but that was it. We didn't get to see the eclipse.
Yeah.
So my first eclipse, total solar eclipse, was when Reasons to Believe took 160 people into the desert of Oregon in 2017.
Wow.
Yeah, what struck me about that, it was a short eclipse, about 2 minutes. But the
Mm-hmm.
wonderful thing about short eclipses is you get to see this spectacular corona of the sun. And
Mm.
I was amazed that I could, with the naked eye, I could see the corona going out 10 moon diameters.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
like, and you
Wow.
can only see that with a short eclipse because you need the moon to almost perfectly eclipse the sun. And a lot of people with us were saying, "Hey, are we going to see stars?" And I said, "With an eclipse that short, you're going to be able to see Venus, you're going to be able to see Jupiter, but that's
Yes.
it. The
Yes.
eclipse is just too short. The thing
Yes.
about a short eclipse is the corona. And if it
Yes.
wasn't for total solar eclipses, we astrophysicists would be a lot more ignorant about stellar astrophysics than we are thanks to total solar eclipses.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
so much of our research has been
Mm,
achieved because of these short solar eclipses. But the wonderful thing about long solar eclipses, the sky actually goes completely dark and you
mm,
can see stars. And,
mm.
as you know, that's what happened in, know, was it 1919 or
Yes.
when they did the Brazil eclipse and
Absolutely.
lasted more than 7 minutes and
Yes.
they could see stars and
Yes.
actually test Einstein's theory of
Yes.
general relativity.
Yes.
That
Oh, yes.
can't be done unless the eclipse is at least 6 minutes. But I think that's the wonder of being alive at this time in the history of the Earth Moon system. We have a range of total solar eclipses from less than zero, where you just get a ring of fire
Mm,
around the moon, to where it lasts as long as 7.5 minutes.
mm,
And you get different physics from the different durations.
mm. And
And I
it's
think you're going to the one in Egypt, right? That's going to be a long one.
mm. Oh, that's right. First of all, Hugh, I'd love to respond to your 1919. You know, as you well know, of course, but for the listeners, uh, Einstein had predicted that light doesn't travel in straight lines in strong gravitational force fields, but that light travels in so-called geodesics in space-time. I don't want to become technical, but you, of course, perfectly would understand me. But
Oh, it's a curve, right? And light basically curves.
yes,
That's
light
the main
basically
way to
curves
do it.
around the sun is what Einstein predicted. And Sir Arthur Eddington was the team leader, I believe, in 1919, the solar eclipse. And you are quite correct there. Again, I walked down memory lane, setting up all these gargantuan telescopes. You can imagine it was an absolute, must have been a nightmare shipping all these huge, we talk of taking, say, a kilogram or 2 or 5 kilograms of photographic equipment. Yet now, then they would take loads, probably tons of equipment to Brazil and elsewhere. And yes, I remember Einstein's excitement, when the results were, I think it was via telegram that Einstein was informed that his theory was actually correct. And that, of course, reset our thinking from Newtonian physics to to cosmology as delineated by general relativity. And so we have nothing more and nothing less than the eclipse of 1919 to thank for that, because on those early photographic plates, and they were glass plates, and that again is another story for another day and another podcast. But the point really is they saw the stars shifting. Uh,
Yeah.
would you like to elaborate on that a little bit, Hugh, for our
Yeah.
listeners?
Well, Einstein's theory of relativity predicted that for a body as massive as the sun's gravity would be able to bend the light of stars in its background by as much as 1 arc second. And it was Arthur Eddington said, "Hey, with the right telescopes, we can actually measure that."
Mm,
And he was able to show that indeed the positions of the stars shifted to the degree that Einstein's theory predicted. And you're right, he sent a telegram to him. And a couple of years later, I don't know if you're aware of this, Sir Arthur Eddington was interviewed about the total solar eclipse and made the comment, general relativity is extremely challenging to understand. There's only two of us in the world that really understand it, and I'm not so sure about the other guy.
oh, that's lovely. Oh, that's lovely. So Eddington wasn't sure whether he understood it fully. Now, I think it's an absolute, we're talking about eclipses in this little podcast, and that 1919 solar eclipse, total solar eclipse, really was the catalyst for modern cosmology. And we
It
must
really was.
keep it.
And, we're not going to be able to see total solar eclipses for a whole lot longer. I mean, the moon is gradually spiraling away from the Earth. And
Mm,
so only relatively recently has the moon's diameter in the sky been sufficiently similar to the sun's diameter that we can see total solar eclipses.
mm,
And as the moon continues to spiral away, a time will come when we can't see any total solar eclipses at all.
mm,
And the window is about 300 million years wide.
mm.
So it's like, but the interesting thing is we're kind of in the middle of that window, which
Yes.
allows us to see total solar eclipses that range from a few seconds all the way up to 7.5 minutes. And that's where you get the most science out
Mm,
of being able to observe total solar eclipses.
mm,
And it's like, that kind of points to me there's a God that said, I'm going to create Adam and Eve at just the right time so their descendants can actually glean the maximum possible physics
mm.
out of these beautiful solar eclipses. So, yes,
Oh,
you're right. They're incredibly gorgeous to witness,
mm,
but look at all the science we can pull out of it.
mm. You know, Hugh, you've just touched on something so important as you were talking. It again points to the grace of the Lord. I don't know, God takes such pleasure in giving us so many pieces of evidence, as you've so beautifully said over all these years, starting with your book, your beautiful book, The Fingerprint of God, is that these are fingerprints, and you've said it so beautifully, is that, in millions of years' time, we will not be seeing eclipses like this, which we will see this year, August, and then the big one in over Egypt next year. And to me, it's God's grace, because if it wasn't for 1919, it would have been so hard, or almost impossible then anyway, to prove that general relativity was true. But here was an obvious experiment. This is the wonder, is that Einstein did all the equations, as you well know, but here was a physical experiment, and you're just talking of minute deflections of just over an arc second, as you've said, but that reset the stage from Newton, light travels in straight line, to Einstein, light travels in curved lines in space-time. And thanks to eclipses and the grace of the Lord for allowing us to witness these at this epoch.
Now, I hear you're going to be going to the one in Egypt. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, you.
Yeah.
So
And
carry on.
yeah, tell us about the eclipse in Egypt that's going to be taking place.
So, with pleasure. Hugh, this is an eclipse which passes over Luxor, the city of Luxor in Egypt, and it's called the eclipse of the century for many reasons. First of all, Hugh, the duration of totality is over 6 minutes. That's astonishing. In fact, it's close to 6.5 minutes. But there's something very important, or the many points here. First of all, it's taking place in Luxor, so you've got the Valley of the Kings nearby. You've got the giant statues of ancient pharaohs, the colossi of Memnon. It's exceedingly historic. It's just, we'll be on the west bank of the Nile, and close to all these very ancient sites occupied by so many of the ancient pharaohs. But there's something very important, and that is Luxor is really desert domain, as you well know, which means that, first of all, the weather will be excellent. The chance of precipitation or cloud on the day of the total solar eclipse in August 2 next year over Luxor is about 1% or less. So basically, it's completely dry. But there's something very, very important as another point which I'd love you to elucidate on, Hugh, and that is the speed at which the shadow of the moon will be seen with a naked eye to move across the desert sand. You really need a desert, right, to experience the moon shadow moving across the desert. at such speed. And for our listeners who might not be aware of the speeds, I've computed that it'll be about 1,800 to 2,000 kilometers per hour. That's extraordinary, the moon shadow moving over the desert, which is 1,100 to 1,250 miles per hour. So those are just rough calculations. But the point is that imagine standing in Luxor and you've got all these ancient archaeological sites, right? Maybe we're standing at the Valley of the Kings, yet to be determined, or some of these ancient sites where the Egyptians frequented. Then the sun not only grows dark for 6.5 minutes, but there's so much more on either side of the eclipse, and that will last for a period of some hours, as you know. But to me, the very exciting point will be the shadow of the moon encroaching over the temples at Luxor, and it's created a frenzy which one cannot even begin to imagine. I was just watching the finals of the Soccer World Cup in New Jersey, and this is regarded by many as the astronomical Soccer World Cup of the century. To give you an idea of the hype, Hugh, I am told that hotels were fully booked 3 years ago. And this is no joke. If you go to any accommodation sites now, you'll see hotels advertised at thousands of dollars, multiple thousands of dollars per night. It is absolutely staggering. But from my mind and from my perspective, it's worth it. And I'll tell you why. It's worth it because I'll never forget standing near to you, Hugh, in Texas. It was April 2024, and we had a group of Reasons to Believe supporters
Yeah,
with
we
us.
had 350 people from Reasons to Believe that day.
And I'll never
Yeah.
forget, you gave a lecture before the eclipse and you said, watch for the shadow. Now, it wasn't that easy to see because it wasn't desert, right? We had a lot of grass everywhere. But the point is, from the desert, I'd love you to elucidate what people in Luxor can expect to see with a shadow racing across at nearly 2,000 kilometers per hour.
Well, you are correct that it's easiest to see in a desert area. And, there were people in our group, and we were at the 2017 eclipse in the Oregon desert that positioned themselves on a hill and watched the shadow of the eclipse completely eclipse Mount Jefferson, which is a 10,000 foot high mountain. So the whole mountain went into darkness as the shadow came
Wow,
towards the observer.
wow,
But
wow.
because it was a 2.5 minute eclipse, the width of the shadow wasn't that great. And
Mm,
so what you're going to see in Luxor will be much more spectacular because you're looking at a 6.5 minute eclipse, not a
mm,
2.5 minute eclipse. But yeah, I would tell people in your group, get up on a high hill somewhere and watch the shadow come towards you. And when the eclipse is all over, watch it race away from you because that's
mm,
kind of fun too. The
mm,
eclipse is over, the
mm,
7 minutes have gone by, but you can still see the shadow racing away from you, as you pointed out, at about 1,600 kilometers per hour. And my
mm.
dad saw that when he was young, and he says there's nothing like watching the shadow speed towards you, engulf you in darkness for a few minutes, then race away. But
That's
yeah, you have
incredible.
to be in a dry place, and you got
Mm,
to be up on a hill in order
mm,
for to be able to have that experience.
mm. Well, Hugh, that is correct. It's not only the shadow coming towards us, but at the end of the eclipse, moving away at such an incredible speed. But there's something else about the eclipse next year, which I'd love to inform our listeners about, and that's this. Um, I've estimated, based on the right ascension and declination of the sun and of the moon, is that the altitude of the sun, the moon and the sun, at the time of totality next year will be about 82 degrees.
Oh,
Now, what's so
wow.
special about that is that you've got atmospheric shimmering reduced to minimum. Because if you're looking at an eclipse, and you might like to elucidate on this, Hugh, but if you're looking at a total eclipse, say 20 degrees above the horizon or 30 degrees above the horizon, the atmosphere shimmers. And so if you
Right.
use telescopes, you start magnifying the air cells and you can't see the corona that clearly, or the Bailey, or the diamond ring effect, or the Bailey beads, and so forth. But this is something which no eclipse operators have really cottoned onto. Really, I haven't seen it discussed anyway. Is that the sun's almost at the zenith during totality, and so that is the best possible locale to secure photographs of the diamond ring, the corona, and the total eclipse experience. Would you like to elucidate on that? I think that's remarkable.
Well, for an eclipse that long, you're actually going to be able to see stars
Hmm,
fairly close to the sun. And yeah, you got the shimmering of the atmosphere, which is going to make it challenging to see the dimmer stars. But the best time will be about 6 minutes into the total solar eclipse. Because what happens, especially over a desert, when the sun is eclipsed, the temperature drops and it can drop 20, 25 degrees.
hmm.
So I remember telling people when we were in Oregon, hey, it's like 30 degrees centigrade right now, but the temperature is going to drop. You're going to need to put on a jacket. It's going to
Yes.
drop that much. But as it drops, eventually the coolness settles.
Hmm,
And when the temperature stabilizes after a few minutes into the eclipse, is when you get the best seeing in the sky. So, people will say, hey, the first minute, I see a lot of instability. Just
hmm,
be patient. This is a
hmm,
long eclipse. If you wait a few minutes, the sky is going to stabilize and you're going to be able to see even the faint stars next to the sun.
hmm.
And yeah, at least bring a pair of binoculars with you so you can look up there and see those little stars and be
Yes,
able to duplicate
yes.
to some degree what Sir Arthur Eddington did back in 1919.
Hmm.
You'll actually see the stars close. And of course, in a pair of binoculars, you're not going to see the stars shifting. And hey, unless you're an astronomer, you're not even going to notice that they're any different.
No,
So,
that's true. But I was just telling you, we were just chatting before the podcast was being recorded here, that I've already bought a special lens to take advantage of this, because the point is, you and I will not be alive for another event like this in the desert. The sun's at the zenith, the stars are shining. After around 5 to 6 minutes, as you beautifully said, you are dark adapted, which means you can start seeing many, many stars. I mean, it's an extraordinary event, and I believe that this is the reason why Luxor was booked out almost 3 years ago, is that it is of a staggering, not only scientific importance, but I would like to say this, if I may, Hugh, it's of staggering emotional. It's a staggering emotional experience as well, because to stand in the footsteps, of Einstein, of Eddington, and his team, and then to be in Luxor, the ancient city where the pharaohs lived and worked and reigned, the ancient Thebes, as you know. It's not Cairo, this is Luxor, and that's why I'm trying to. I will be in Egypt in 2 weeks' time, Liz and I, but we are trying to rent, as it were, or charter a boat called a dahabeah. Those are these ancient wooden boats which the pharaohs used to sail up and down the Nile. And the idea of a private charter is this: you need to get away from the crowds, because if you're trying to witness this magnificent event and you've got people running to and fro and hither and thither, it destroys the experience, right? So you need to be alone with your group. You need to be quiet and alone. It reminds me of our Lord himself. He went into a desert place alone to pray. And Pascal emphasizes, didn't he, Hugh, the wonder of silence and listening to God in a
well,
silent
that was the
room.
wonderful thing about the reasons to believe trips we did in 2017 and 2024. We basically rented a Christian camp that happened to be in the total eclipse path. We had the whole place to ourselves. And I was able to take people up on high hills, and there was no one else around. So, and just having that experience with people that you love, being able to witness that. And the thing I noticed is even young children were awed by what they saw.
Hmm.
So even those who didn't understand all the science behind it. So you're right. It has an incredible emotional experience. I think what excites me about what you're organizing in Egypt, the pharaohs that built those structures in Luxor were the same pharaohs that said, we need to invest in astronomy.
Hmm.
And at the peak of the Egyptian empire, as much as 25% of the gross national product of the Egyptian empire was funneled to the astronomers.
Hmm.
I think that would make you envious, right? Can
Yes.
you imagine having 25% of South
I
Africa's gross national product
can't. I
to
can't.
be able to devote to astrophysical research? But it's because of that enormous investment that these ancient Egyptian pharaohs put into astronomy that today we have data. And the thing that amazes me about these ancient Egyptian astronomers, without telescopes, just with transit instruments, just with these stone observatories where they arranged the stones to be like gun sights to make as accurate measurements as they could, they were still able to measure the variation of variable stars, in some cases to 5 places of the decimal.
Hmm. Hmm.
And because of that, I mean, the most famous example is what they did with the star Algol. They measured its period to 5 places of the decimal.
Hmm.
Today, we can measure it to 9 or 10 places of the decimal. But
Hmm.
because it's an eclipsing variable star, its physics changes over time.
Hmm.
And their records go back to 3500 BC.
Hmm.
And so we can look at their records from that time to about 1000 BC,
Hmm.
compare it with our modern day measurements, and it's
Hmm.
actually revealing physics of the interior structure of stars
Hmm.
that we couldn't have gotten
Hmm.
unless the ancient Egyptians devoted that much time and attention and meticulous care to their observations to make those points. So we're the beneficiaries of
Hmm.
ancient peoples
Hmm.
basically saying, the heavens are wonderful. We need to investigate that wonder. So
You
even
know,
without that Bible verse,
yes. Carry on. Yes. You know, Hugh, one other thing regarding being the beneficiaries of all these ancients is, do you remember that the fact that the Earth is not flat, but an oblate spheroid, was computed by Eratosthenes, right?
in
And
Egypt,
in
yeah.
didn't he put his shadow sticks in Egypt? It was. And he measured the deflections of starlight and shadows of the shadow stick, shadows cast by the stick which he placed there, and he actually computed the radius of the Earth. I mean, that was extraordinary all those years ago.
Yeah, actually did it to 1% precision.
Hmm.
So,
That's astonishing. That is absolute. I mean, I've done that. I've done that little calculation with my students in first year, and it's astonishing. You get it out almost correctly. As you say, within a few percent, it is absolutely staggering. Again, done from Egypt, and I think that's a wonderful reason, for a group to, come with us to experience this eclipse, not maybe in someplace in the Sahara Desert, but in Luxor, where these giants,
well, you were with us in 2024 in Texas,
mm,
and 4 of us gave talks um, before and after the eclipse. And I remember one of them we were talking about because of lunar eclipses and solar eclipses, the ancient peoples could make relatively accurate measurements of the solar system, determine that stars were bodies like the sun. And so the idea that the ancients had no idea what the universe was like, a total myth. Thanks
mm,
to lunar eclipses and solar eclipses, they knew that the Earth was spherical. They knew how big it was. They knew how far away the moon was. They knew its size, its rough distance. Same thing for the sun. They figured out that the sun was such a massive body, it had to be the center of the solar system, that the
yes,
Earth actually revolved around the sun. People think, well, the ancients thought that the Earth was the center. They
mm,
didn't. The
mm,
problem was they didn't have algebra. And
mm,
without algebra, the only way you can calculate the future position of planets is to do it from an Earth center perspective.
mm,
But Ptolemy didn't believe the Earth was the center of the solar system. He
mm,
believed the sun was. but he
mm,
developed the math to be able to figure out the future positions of planets from an Earth centered perspective.
mm,
I think people often give Copernicus too much credit that he was the one that discovered that the sun's the center of the solar system, all the
mm,
planets revolve around it. If you
mm,
actually read what Copernicus had written, what happened was he traveled from Poland to the great Italian libraries and discovered that the ancient astronomers had determined that the sun was the center of the solar system. So, in one sense, you could say he plagiarized, but
mm,
hey, uh, he did actually give credit to the fact that, hey, I went to those libraries, I saw what the ancients did, and I realized that they were right.
mm,
So,
mm.
I mean, you're a big fan of pointing out we need to get the history right.
Well,
That's
that's
just one
right.
example. Yeah,
Well, that's right. I mean, I was one of the pioneers, perhaps, I don't know if you want to call it that, for forcing astronomers, right, to rename the Hubble constant. Because I went to Belgium, I studied the work of Georges Lemaitre, and I pushed, as you know, Hugh, and I pushed and I pushed. I said, this is wrong that Edwin Hubble gets all the credit when Lemaitre had uh, suggested a value for the a value for the rate at which the Big Bang universe expands several years before, I think in 1926, somewhere around there. Hubble
right.
came much later. And this was wrong. And I really fought hard for it. And not only myself, other astronomers too, but I was one of those who really refused to give in. And at a meeting of the International Astronomical Union, as you know, Hugh, it's no longer called the Hubble constant, the rate of expansion of our universe, but it's called the Hubble Lemaitre constant. So you
Right.
have to give credit where credit is due, and perhaps Copernicus should have given much more credit, perhaps, to the fact that the ancients laid the cornerstone in all of this.
Yeah, and I think Copernicus tried to do that. The problem was that his colleagues basically gave him all the credit when
Yes.
Copernicus himself pointed out, hey, I went to the libraries and found out what the ancient astronomers had discovered. So,
But you know, Hugh, there's something else which might intrigue your listeners, and that is to do with Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Is that Tutankhamun, in the burial site, you've got him wearing a scarab, and in the scarab is a piece of molten desert glass. And we wondered, where does this desert glass come from? Why is it in the scarab? The necklace, the scarab, whatever you want to call it. And we actually found that this was the result, the stone was produced as a result of a comet coming into the Earth's atmosphere and exploding above the desert. And the temperatures rose so much that it really turned the desert sands into glass. And the ancient Egyptians took this glass and placed it in Tutankhamun's scarab. Now, we actually named that comet Hypatia. Now, Hypatia, of course, was this very famous female Greek mathematician, also in Egypt. Dreadful history there. But we named the Comet Hypatia to honor perhaps the first female, in a sense, and the first female astronomer, in a sense, is that the first famous female astronomer. And that is incredible to think that also happened in the land of Egypt.
well, I think you're going to really enjoy seeing that. I mean, I have a friend who went to an eclipse decades ago in Egypt, and he said it was the best eclipse he'd ever seen. And he had seen 11 eclipses.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
so yeah, I think you're going to be thrilled what you see. And I want to remind our viewers too that back in 2024, you and I and two other scholars at Reasons to Believe gave talks on the physics of the total eclipse, the amazing things we can learn about the sun, and the fact that God put us here at just the right time to be able to see his full glory revealed in the physics of the sun and the physics of the eclipses. All those talks you can watch or listen to at the Reasons to Believe YouTube channel. Just go there and you'll see 2024 Total Solar Eclipse Conference, and all the conference talks are there.
Mm,
It also includes the Q&A. We had
mm.
amazing questions from the audience.
I
And
remember.
to me, that was often the best part of the talk, is
mm,
just hearing people. And if you can recall, I remember it was a 10 or 11-year-old boy that kept asking you challenging questions.
mm,
So,
mm,
look for that treat. He was asking questions all the time.
mm,
Quite a little prodigy, up and coming astronomer.
mm.
So,
I
yeah,
remember
he
that very distinctly, Hugh. And if I might just add a little blurb to the eclipse next year, is that people are welcome to Google reasons to believe Africa, and up will come the Reasons to Believe Africa webpage. And you can just click on Contact David Block, and you can learn all the details about our forthcoming tour to Luxor. But I'll never forget the electric atmosphere, Hugh, in those talks in April of 2024. Your talk, standing ovation. The uh, the crowds were so receptive. It was such an emotional experience for me, really, all round. Not only the eclipse, but the lectures. You spoke. I remember very clearly. I think it was George Haraskin spoke.
yes.
Jeff spoke, and then you graciously invited me to talk. And it sort of was the creme brulee to an incredible experience, is that we were not only granted the opportunity to view the eclipse, but we were granted the incredible opportunity to listen to these extraordinary minds and to feast on the intellectual pursuits of what eclipses have to teach us. And I'd encourage everyone, to go to those YouTube channels of yours.
Well, what I remember about that conference was just how emotional people got about the eclipse, but you saw the same emotion when we had those talks. And
Mm,
I get letters from people saying, hey, that's where I met friends. And they're retaining the friendships that they first were blossomed at that 2024 eclipse.
mm,
So, yeah, there's something about the eclipse that
mm,
causes people to bond together,
mm,
basically experience. And the fact they were all believers, that was phenomenal. So, the fellowship was the best I'd ever seen. And if you watch those recordings on our YouTube channel, you'll actually be able to see the emotional effect that the lectures and the eclipse had on people.
mm,
So,
mm.
with that, let me bring this. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's right, Hugh. It was a very emotional experience all round, not only seeing you racing to the top of the hills to show people the encroaching shadow, and I remember you doing that, and it was pretty hot. But the beautiful thing is this: people must not let this one go. I'm not saying this for any financial reasons at all, far from it. I'm saying this as a prof in astronomy and in dialogue with you is you cannot afford to miss this eclipse in Luxor next year, because to my mind, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, but it's like following on in the legacy of the 1919 eclipse. I mean, everything is right. The desert is there. You'll see the moon shadow encroaching. It's at the zenith. I mean, what more does one want, Hugh?
Well, uh, I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Your people will enjoy it. But let me bring this to a close. And I want to thank all of you for watching this Stars, Cells, and God. Remember to like it when you view it on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcasts. Tell your friends about it. And please, if you got comments, we do read your comments. We don't always respond, but we do read your comments. They're much appreciated. They really do encourage us and help us when we try to develop new episodes of Stars, Cells, and God. And yes, we're at an amazing time in the history of the universe where we're able to see the extent of the glory of God basically displayed not only in solar eclipses, but everywhere in the universe, here on Earth. And that's what we're here for, Reasons to Believe, is basically to show you that the more we learn about science, the more reasons we have to believe in Jesus Christ as Creator, Lord, and Savior, and the Bible as the inspired, inerrant Word of God. Thank you.